Good afternoon and welcome to this second Cognism live broadcast. This broadcast is all about ABM. My name is Alistair Corsi, I'm the head of marketing at Cognism and I will be your moderator for today. I know only too well, being a marketer myself, that there's a huge amount of noise out there about ABM, and yet it still seems to be very misunderstood and hard to navigate. In this broadcast, we'll aim to focus on practical tips and tricks that you can implement in your business today to help get started with ABM. The broadcast is being recorded and will be sent around after the session along with a copy of the slides. We've also reserved 10 minutes at the end for some live Q&A, so please submit your questions throughout so that we can answer these at the end. Joining me today, I have a great panel with me. Sorry, I'm just having some problems navigating the slides. 2 seconds. Okay, here's our panel. Thank you. So joining me today, we have a great panel of experts, all of who have extensive experience implementing ABM on the front lines. I'm joined by Nick Mason, founder and CEO of Turtle. Turtle is a company. Hi, Nick. Thanks for joining.
No,
Turtle's a company. Turtle's a company which is changing the way that go-to-marketers engage and convert prospects with content. So Nick has a lot of experience around how you can utilize content in your ABM campaigns and strategies. And they are also a regular on the Cognism speaking circuit, having most recently spoken at Revenue AI. So we're very excited to have Nick with us today. Next up, we have Owen Steer. Owen is from Punch, and they are an ABM agency that specialise in targeting the modern buyer. Owen actually came to be a part of this webinar as a result of Punch's ABM outreach to me. So they obviously have some great tips and tricks to share, and it's working.
Hi, Alice. Thanks for the introduction. I'm looking forward to getting stuck in and talking about some of the nitty gritty behind ABM.
Great, thank you. And then next up we have Joe Birkdale, who is the founder and CEO of Project 36. Project 36 are a partner of ours and have extensive experience implementing successful ABM campaigns for their clients.
Good morning, thanks for inviting me along today.
Great, and sorry for those who couldn't see the slides just at the beginning there. You should all be able to see them now. If you have any issues, please just chat in. Okay, great, so moving on. The agenda. So what we want to look at and cover today is, what does good ABM campaign look like? How do you decide which tactics to use? What tech is out there to help? And is there a no tech route for those? I think there's probably going to be a mixture of company sizes on this webinar today, and we want to make sure we cover it off for everyone. How about the metrics and what should you track, as well as how to be successful in aligning sales and the rest of the business with your ABM, because I think this is an important part for any successful campaign. And then we're going to ask each of the panelists to give their top tips for success. Great, so getting started on what does a good ABM campaign look like. Today we really want to focus on giving you some very actual advice. For that reason, we're going to skip the normal introduction into what is ABM. We're going to assume a level of knowledge and just get stuck in straight away. So getting started, Joe, would you like to kick off with goal setting and how you recommend approaching this?
Yeah, absolutely, and just to reiterate, thanks for inviting me along. So to kick us off in answering what does a good ABM look like, I'm going to actually add something that I think you're probably going to hear a lot of today, and that is, it depends. It depends on the client, it depends on the market, the vertical and the territory that the ABM campaign is running in. And then of course it depends on the client's particular objectives. So when we go about implementing ABM programs for our clients, it's during the discovery phase that we really get together with our sales teams, senior and junior, those at the coal face, and we drill into their existing sales cycle. We really understand the steps or the phases that exist, the blockers and the objections, the timescales that they're working with, what's the buying journey like, how long does it take to convert a typical sale from initial inquiry through to conversion. And that's really important because we need to know those things to set the KPIs for or the goals for the campaign. For example, if it takes 12 months to close a normal client from initial inquiry to actual execution and getting the purchase order, expecting that to happen in a 6-month ABM pilot you're setting yourself up to fail. So you really do need to understand and map out what that individual client or that individual product or service or sector typically works with. And there's your benchmarks from there. And no two clients are the same. So once we've got those, we tend to find that senior decision makers expect to see what we call a direction of travel. And it's during that discovery that you'll establish exactly what that direction of travel looks like for them. But as I said right at the start, it really does depend.
Great, thank you, Joe. That's really helpful. And Nick, would you like to talk about how you go about setting your goals at Turtle?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, very much agree with Joe. It's going to be different depending on, what context you're in. The thing that we did is, we're in a business where sales cycles are typically between 6 and 12 months. So we're in that situation where, as Joe says, you don't want to be waiting, 12 months to work out whether whether your campaigns are going to be working, whether ABM is going to be something that's a good fit. So what we did is we said, well, the early signs of closing revenue is actually, in our case, moving weighted predicted MRR, in our case, monthly recurring revenue, into the sales qualified lead stage. So what this means is that the ABM team have been able to reach out to and engage with a customer, a prospect, and have qualified this to the point where they've passed it over to sales. Sales have said, yes, this looks good. Perhaps they've even gone in and had an initial meeting and uncovered the precise need and requirements, and then said, I think that I can close this at X with a probability of Y. And so this is what we looked for when we were setting up ABM, is to get to that stage as quickly as we can. But as you mature with this, as we've matured with this, we're now starting to look at, okay, that's fine that this was in the sales pipeline with a revenue and a probability, but what's actually closing? And obviously you can only do that, as Joe says, once the full sales cycle is being completed. So I think, just really reiterating what Joe has said, but in our specific context, you have to, understand what's achievable in the timescales that you're allotting for ABM to get off the ground, and then have sort of longer term ambitions for metrics and goals.
Great, yeah, I think that's really important, Nick. And just for everyone who's listening, I think this slide in terms of setting out your framework for when you do set the goals is quite useful, and you need to identify whether you're goal setting type 1 or goal setting type 2. And this should be quite useful if you want to take it away when you go out and set out your campaign strategy and using it to implement yourselves. So moving on to the next stage, which is identifying your target accounts. So we've kindly borrowed some of these resources from Punch. Go over and check out their blog. They've got a huge amount of resources on ABM. So I think, Owen, if you want to talk us through how you at Punch go about helping your clients identify target accounts and how you use STEM for that, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, certainly I can elaborate on that a little bit. And also I think it's a good follow on from what Joe and Nick have both said there, which is essentially how important alignment and agreeing in the early stages around things like the goals and expectations of ABM is, and certainly that identifying target accounts is something that will come after you've been through that process of aligning, which is why certainly from Punch's perspective, this is not the first stop since alignment, but certainly one where it's really crucial, where we'll say, like, we need to get sales, marketing and customer success involved here in identifying the target accounts that we want to pump resources in for ABM. So you see the STEM model on the slide there. That essentially works as a complement or as part of developing a ideal customer profile. So we tend to use a workshop format for this kind of activity in the setup and strategy phase of ABM, where, as I said, we'll have marketing, customer success and sales in a room, and we'll have a look at what accounts are on their radar out in the market, to sort of look at where they would fall, whether they were strategic, and it's all based on sort of, if you're looking outwards at the market, estimated lifetime value, and we want to get an understanding for where internally people think the value of accounts are, and then from that we will then look at actually current customers and historic customers, and start realistically looking at the sort of firmographic data and the information that you can start to list from these current and historic customers, that starts to map out actually what your ideal customer looks like. The benefits of making sure that customer success are involved here as well, is that they're going to be the most poised to sort of elaborate on these customers and fill the rest of the team in with that information. And once you work together and you agree on what an ideal customer looks like, you can then build something called your total addressable market. And you'll notice on the right here we've got sort of a 3x3 grid. This is actually it's a grid that is taken from one of the tools that we use in our MarTech stack, which is Nexus, and it's an intent platform. But it also helps us to sort of map alongside our total addressable market. And what it does is, once you have a list of companies that fit the ideal customer profile, you can start to grade those companies based on a couple of things: how closely they fit with historically companies you have had success with, and also the tool helps to show actually which of these companies are showing signals online of intent to either enter or already be in a buying window. And from this, you can start to map out the lowest hanging fruit from your total addressable market. And certainly when you're selecting such a few amount of accounts for strategic ABM, you need this kind of information to ensure that you're picking the accounts that are most likely to turn into revenue.
That's great, thanks, Erin.
That will make sense.
Really actionable and really helpful for sure. Nick, do you have any experience from the front line in terms of what you guys do at Turtle when you've identified your target accounts that you want to add?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I very much agree with what's being said there around, being absolutely clear on who your ideal customer is. And I think this is something that every business should do, even beyond ABM. So, if ABM is something that's the activity that's the catalyst to cause that to happen, that's something that's going to be an incredibly useful exercise even outside of the ABM context. The thing that I would say, I suppose, on top of that is, once you're clear on that, one of the things that can be interesting and that is interesting to encourage salespeople to do is to think about, it depends again exactly the type of campaign you want to run, but who are we not selling to at the moment that we think that we could be selling to? So you can either use this kind of thing to sell more to the markets that you already know you're successful in, or you could say, as we did recently, say, well, actually there's this market over here that looks a lot like a market that we're quite good in. How well can we understand that market? How well can we convince ourselves that this is going to behave like the market we're already strong in? And then how do we begin to target accounts within there? So there's various different ways that you can do it depending on what you're trying to achieve. But I'd say, identifying the target and being extremely clear on that from day one and having alignment on it across, everyone who's going to be involved in the project, from marketing to sales and anyone else involved, is kind of crucial, because otherwise you're going to set yourself up for failure. Just having that clarity is ultimate vitality. It's really important.
Thanks, Nick. And Joe, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, two things really. Well, first of all, I agree with both the guys there, but two things to add really is, you've got to be absolutely honest with the type of customer that you can service. Going after the Apple, for example, if you wanted to sell to Apple, can you actually handle them? Do they need what you sell? So when you're putting together a dream team of target lists who you want to go and approach, be honest with yourselves. Really challenge yourself in your own boardrooms. Can we deliver? Have we got what they need? Are we at the right level? Do we have the testimonial that's going to enable us to get in there? So that's the first stage. And the second step really is, you need the data. You need a source for that data, however you want to generate it, whether it's in an inbound campaign that you want to run first of all to give you the target data, or whether you want to work with yourselves at Cognism and get some accurate data that you can trust and rely on. That's really important, and the quality of that data is really going to help you engage, and we'll touch on this in a little while, but it's going to really help you engage through the organization, in particular with sales, if they trust that data. So that's really the only thing I would add, is that you've got to be honest with yourselves. Can you service the accounts you're going to go for, and do you trust the data that you've got?
Yeah, I think those are actually really important points. Thanks, Joe. Okay, moving on, because I'm conscious of time. I think the next stage is engaging them with personalised campaigns. So the key to, I think we'll agree, to any successful ABM campaign is going to rest on the level of personalisation you're going to be able to deliver and execute on. There are ways that you can hack this together to work at scale, and I've put down some sort of top tips on the left for you to have a look at. And there's also a nice resource there from Raconteur on this. But I think, Nick, given that content is really your bread and butter, would you like to kick us off with some real world examples of what works in your experience?
Absolutely. So personalization in our experience, and I can only really speak from our experience, is the difference between this working and not working. Because we all receive so many emails that say, hi, Nick, and hi, Joe at the top. I was actually at a conference last year that talked about how, people's appreciation of that is decreasing over time because we know that's done by a computer and it doesn't have any effect on us anymore. So the personalization that we do actually needs to be very meaningful. And that really has to start by properly understanding who you're going after. So the type of thing that we will do if we start going after an account is we will obviously read their website top to bottom, see what they're talking about on social media, but we'll also do things like read their annual report and read any kind of investor information that's out there, or anything we can get our hands on, from particularly from a high level stakeholder kind of perspective. Because if we're coming in and we're tailoring our message to talk exactly to what the CEO, for example, has said the business is going to do in digital transformation or whatever, and we're able to point out, hey, your CEO has said that the business is moving in this direction, we can help you move in this direction. It's very difficult for the person on the receiving end of that to ignore it, because this is the overall direction of the business as set by the CEO. So we always look to do that kind of thing and really understand the direction of travel for the business as a whole. There's a great opportunity to get good engagement. And understanding in that any communication that you give, the notes that you need to hit. And so for example, we've done stuff with people where we will go the fully personalized route, looking at this raconteur diagram, where we'll create an entirely bespoke piece of content for someone. And we did this recently, actually. So we create an entirely bespoke piece, sent it actually to 3 people originally. And we were very selective about what was said in the email, how we positioned it, what the piece of content was, etc. And I think 3 or 4 days later, we saw that this had been read by 65 people in different locations around the world. And we've got inbound inquiries now coming from people who we never contacted, saying, I came across this document that was circulated internally. I'd really like to have a chat with you. And that was the ultimate sort of level of personalization. I have kind of other stories I could share along similar lines, but again, conscious of time. The thing that I would say, for us is that, at least certainly in the early stages, I think it's far better to go as personalized as you can, and then work out potentially later how you can scale, and give the ABM project as much chance to succeed as you can, rather than try and do something quicker and less personalized, and then when it doesn't work, wonder whether this is just something that we need to carry on with, or maybe this is never going to work out for us. I'd always rather go the full 9 yards and then work out how to scale later. That certainly has been something that's worked well for us.
Thanks, Nick. I think that's a really important point as well. Kind of nicely leads us on to the next point too, which is that personalizing campaigns and generating content can be very time consuming, and often quite daunting, I think, when you get started with ABM. It's sort of like, we've got all this content sitting on our blog, on our website, but I don't really know where to start. How do I map this out and create a campaign that's actually going to work? So Joe, obviously you're working with clients all the time on this. Would you be able to sort of shed some light on how you approach it when you're executing with clients?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it really echoes what Nick just said, but also what you've just said, in that, yes, it is daunting. I've never come across a client that relishes the task, and it is time consuming. So those two things aside, ultimately, ABM really, it comes into its own when you've got a product or a service that's fairly complex and got a highly customizable sale. By that, I mean you're not selling a widget that's the same for everybody. If you've got a product that takes a long time to convert, that's fairly expensive, highly customizable, and needs a lot of human interaction, then ABM's likely to work for you. As a result, the rewards are much higher. So whilst it can be daunting, whilst it can be time consuming, it's really imperative that it gets done. So as well as having personalized campaigns, look for, and I'm aware we want to try and give some tips here, but look for things like sales triggers. If you've got source to data that enables you to do that, look for sales triggers. When did they have funding, important hires, senior hires, people moving, look in the annual reports like Nick mentioned. Build out gaps in your content. talk about Series A funding in your blogs. If your clients or your target clients have just had some Series A funding, talk about what that means for an organization. Demonstrate that you understand their world before you start selling yours. People buy from people ultimately, and if you can have a shared experience or a shared understanding, that's part of the battle. Because don't forget, you're trying to garner trust and engagement. So you don't have to go straight into sales pitch with your personalization. Your personalization can be a demonstration that we understand your world, your market, the problems that you have, and as a closing point, we can talk about the solution to that in the product or service that you're positioning. But really, it's about understanding what their issues are. Just do your research, really, and I say look for those buying triggers.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I think the other point to note is you probably have more content within that you've already written that you could use for this purpose as well. You just need to repurpose it in a way that's more personalized. So it's not always a case of, oh my gosh, I need to start like writing huge amounts of new pieces of content. Look at what you have, do that audit, and that's a really good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we call that sweating the asset. So your long format content, particularly blogs and things and white papers that have taken a bit of time to put together, probably had a budget against them, particularly if it's a research piece or a white paper, we would sweat that asset. And by that, we would make it work hard. So we would chop it up into different purposes. So we'd make an infographic out of it. We'd make potentially a video or a webinar out of it. We'd do a quick top 10 takeaways, because not all of your targets are going to read a white paper that's 60 pages long. Some are going to want to dive into that detail later on, but initially they might want just the infographic. So we would sweat that asset. So yes, it's a very good point. Most organizations talk about themselves already. It's just getting the key messages down in the right order that's important.
Great, thank you. And then up next, Owen's been kind of to share us a real life case study with Oki. Owen, I'm conscious of time, but if you could give us sort of a quick overview of this case study and why this was great ABM.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the quickest way to do that is to tie it into the two things that we've sort of mainly covered so far. And I think this will be a good segue into that. So obviously touching on what I'd just spoken about with account selection, we absolutely did this when we started our pilot campaign or program with Oki. So we had sales, marketing and customer success, and actually even business development in the room with us. And once we had that process down and we actually had a list of 55 accounts that they think and that we agreed, more importantly, were a good fit for this program that we wanted to run. The problem being we actually wanted to run a one to few campaign, so somewhere between 20 and 30 accounts that were going to be receiving considerable resource and personalization. The reason I touch on this is because we actually did something that is not going to be able to be applicable with every campaign you do, as they've mentioned earlier. No client or campaign is likely to be the same. But we were targeting UK retail, and we have the benefit of actually living and working in the UK and having access to these retailers on the high street. So alongside the intent data that we ran into these accounts to look for buying signals, we also did a 60-page sector report on retail to sort of understand the lay of the land and what the trends were around technology and what's happening as far as ethics in the retail sector. But the third thing we did was actually we built a questionnaire out where we went store to store to these 55 accounts, and we started asking from a store perspective how they actually currently use their in-store print and any challenges that they're currently facing from a sufferer level. We knew that the people we speak to in the store were not going to be the people that sign off on a deal or potentially have any meaningful influence on a decision being made. However, the insights that we learned from how things are actually at store level were really great for informing A, which accounts we go with, and B, what conversations we then have at head office, because it's very easy for sort of a centralized decision maker to know that they have something in place and that in theory it works. So it's really impactful to get these sort of frontline insights and use them to build that rapport and to have a conversation that's worth listening to with the decision makers that we reached out to in the end. And the reason I've mentioned that is because I think it ties quite nicely into the personalised angle that Nick and Joe have just sort of talked upon. And that's that when we applied best practice marketing at the execution phase, we had an on-the-channel outreach. So not only did we have direct mail going out in the form of those remote control cars that you've just seen, but we had a personalised landing page. We did personalised one-to-one video messages. We did emails. We reached out on LinkedIn. We sent postcards, and we held an event as well where we steered people towards an event with direct mail and all of the good stuff that comes with best practice marketing. But the reason we were able to make those pieces of content impactful was because we had these insights from our research that said, hey, look, we aren't coming at you telling you what we can do before we acknowledge what you might need. And we acknowledge those challenges, and we acknowledge the fact that we've taken the time to go and try to understand what's going on. And first and foremost, what we're looking for is a conversation with you so that we can understand even better, because we think we may be able to help you on these things. The result of this sort of campaign and the success of this campaign was obviously not only in the great responses that we received, people thanking us for the outreach and saying that it was amazing and that they'd never really had anything like it, but actually people booking time with the OT sales guys in order to learn more and have this discussion, because it was so clear that the OT were putting the time in to want to be able to solve a problem first and foremost, and then business afterwards. And as you can see on screen there, the result of that is that with a average 12-month sort of sales cycle, we're about 6 months into the campaign at this point, and we've actually received 10 times more pipeline generated than they would normally with traditional lead gen. So it's fantastic. I think they're in the coming weeks, they're looking to sort of close their first deal here. So the success speaks for itself.
That's amazing. Thanks, Owen. I think that's really kind of brings to life everything we've been talking about, which is great. Moving on, just conscious of time, I think this is kind of an important point to touch on, especially as we've spoken about how important it is to personalize your content and the content that you need to be successful in ABM. I think then it does also come down to the tactics. So a successful ABM campaign is going to, big part of it is using the right tactics, and there's a lot to choose from. So it would be great if we can touch on this and from your experience, and if we kick off with Nick in terms of what you've experienced to be the best way to approach it.
Of course. So yeah, again, as we said with much of the previous discussion, it really comes down to who you're going after, both in terms of the type of business, the sector they're in, the type of person you're looking for, and that will help you determine which tactics to use. So it could be a combination of emails and webinars and some stuff on social for a particular market, versus SDR outreach is better for other types of role or market. And so there's really no sort of cookie cutter approach, but all of these are potentially in the mix for what you're doing. The one thing that I would say on top of all of this, which we've kind of tried to be quite good with, is trying to do things that are different and things that stand out. So, everyone is sending email, everyone is sending, well, a lot of people are sending direct mail, but what can you send in the direct mail that's going to really grab people's attention and be different? So these are sort of opportunities to engage. I think that a mix of them is always going to be necessary, and it's going to be dependent on, as I say, who you're going after. But I think always looking for ways to be noteworthy within these tactics, I would say, is sort of the more important aspect here, rather than necessarily, which ones to use in which case. So yeah, always trying to be different and have something new and interesting to say.
Thanks, Nick. Owen, do you have anything to add? And then I think we'll jump into Joe's example after that.
Yeah, I mean, first, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Nick, but if with a little bit more time, I would have gone into detail about some of the reasoning and the messaging behind the remote control car. But absolutely, first and foremost, it doesn't really matter what tactic you use if what you're saying and the way you go about it isn't relevant to sort of the end user or your customer. So Nick's absolutely right. Realistically, the tactics are almost an afterthought. The primary concern is that you've got something that's worth saying and an appropriate way of saying it using a plethora of these tactics. So if you wanted to send carol singers to an office to get a point across, then send carol singers to an office to get a point across, but make sure that the point you get across it ties into what you're trying to say and the conversation you want to have. It should never be sort of being disruptive is good, but only if you've got something good to talk about. You don't want to be disruptive for the sake of it.
Yeah, I think that's a nice point. And then it kind of moves nicely on to, I think that the tactics you use are going to vary depending on the decision maker that you're targeting. And kind of this comes back to that research piece at the very beginning when you're setting out to do ABM and looking at those ICPs and getting as much detail as possible. And I think that, Joe, you've got a really nice example for us on this. Would you like to talk it through?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, us marketeers we get a little ahead of ourselves in that the world of ABM in particular is full of acronyms, well, ABM itself, and there tends to be an assumed level of understanding throughout an organization, right across sales, marketing, customer support and operations, that everybody knows what this ABM campaign is doing, why it exists, why it's got the necessary steps and processes in it. Now, the marketing teams know that, the agency knows that, sales may get an insight, and what we'll touch on in a little while is this total understanding throughout an organization where everybody's aligned, in particular sales and marketing. So one of the common misconceptions actually arises from the need for different personas, or the recognition that there's different personas involved in a purchasing decision. And then the more complex and more expensive your solution or product that you're trying to sell, the more people will be involved in making the purchase. It's not just the purchasing director or financial director. There'll be users, there'll be influencers, there'll be boards, committees, and all sorts of things. They've all got different needs. So to get that point across to our clients who aren't necessarily in marketing but could be in customer services or sales, we use this very simple slide. Take a university, let's say Manchester University, but it could be any university. On its very simple scenario, there's two buyers. There's the student and the parent. These are the decision-making unit. They're buying one course, but there's two people in that decision. So if we move on to the next slide, we need to understand that they've both got different pains. So not necessarily in a particular order of preference, but the student's looking for things like, you know, what's nightlife like? How good's the accommodation? Is there a train station? Can I get home? Can I get to see my friends? Can my friends get to see me? Are my friends going to like this university? Is the course any good? All valid, all relevant to the student. Those are pieces of content and messages that the university needs to get across to appease and to make happy the student. On the flip side, the parent, the other side, or the carer, they want to know more about the course quality, the cost, the employability, university reputation and safety. Is their son, daughter going to be safe? Are they going to get a job afterwards? These are the things that they want to have answered. So there's very different pains, yet they're actually buying the same product. So we find that those two slides help align sales and marketing. And it's really important that marketing teams and sales teams really understand what ABM is, but so does the rest of the organization. So we put those two in there really just to get across that the people on this webinar today probably get ABM, but your organization might not. So for it to really work, everybody needs to understand. So keeping it simple, particularly internally, helps get that message across and helps your campaign work.
Thanks, Jay. I think that's a really nice example. And then moving on to kind of my favourite section. This is all about, so what tech is there out there to help, and is there a no tech route? I think probably everyone on this webinar will be aware that there's just been an explosion in tech within the sales and marketing space. And again, similar to the content piece, it can be a bit overwhelming at times to know where do you start. Like, if I want to do ABM, does that mean I need to have this overly complex tech stack and I need to buy X, Y, and Z tools to help me? And I think that from my perspective, I've always been a big believer that if it's not broken, don't fix it. So there's a lot that you can do just using Google Sheets and Excel and then creating a few Zapier workflows. There's a great resource shared actually in this deck. When we go to helpful resources section, you'll get this at the end of the webinar. It'll be sent out to you. And it's a blog post which is written about how to get started with the lowest level of resource, and they actually provide free templates, and these are based off Excel. So definitely have a look at that if you're interested. And I think just one thing to bear in mind is just don't overlook the use of these free tools that are out there. So kicking us off, Owen, do you have anything more to add on this?
Yeah, I mean, just a quick stance on Punch's take on sort of using technology in ABM. You can absolutely do ABM without technology. And in fact, I would often recommend that you do not rush into making decisions for a technology stack when trying to sort of learn and implement ABM. What will happen, or what I mean by that is, for example, you could start by getting a member of sales, a member of marketing, and a member of customer success in a room with an account manager once a month, and basically looking at the account and saying, okay, where are we up to with the account now? What's our plan? Like, what's our sales plan for this account across the next month? And how can each of our departments leverage the knowledge that we have on these accounts, or potentially accounts like them, to add value and try to sort of speed up or improve the conversation we're having with the account. And as far as an approach is concerned, that would be a way to start applying ABM for what would essentially be the time of your staff. It's not, technically it's not free, but you don't need to invest heavily in order to start changing the way you think about providing value to customers. However, what I will say is that once you start getting involved in ABM, you'll very quickly realize the areas where technology can be really, really helpful for you, and also some of the areas, particularly in sort of one-to-one strategic ABM, where technology actually runs risks, and you have to make sure that you're really careful that you aren't using technology to automate what would otherwise be a really human conversation. I'm sure that Nick will have a lot of expertise in how to make sure that when scaling you don't run that risk. So I'll just finish there on a note that actually Punch ourselves use HubSpot as a CRM. We use Vidyard to record personalized videos. Science are actually helping us with intent data, and we use Cognism as well as an email platform and for things like sales triggers. So the technology will definitely help, but certainly don't rush into getting a big technology stack before you've got your feet or your foundation for ABM.
Thanks, Owen. I realise I'm probably going to get in trouble with my management for saying don't rush into tech, given that we're a tech solution. Nick, you're the founder of a tech solution as well. We've got Turtle up there. I think it'd be nice to get your take on this as well.
Yeah, I'm going to say exactly the same thing, and possibly I will get in trouble as well. But I would say, tech is not going to be a silver bullet. I mean, you see this so often with so many things where there's a new initiative, and before people even really understand it, they start talking about what technology they're going to need. But I think that more often than not, the technology ends up getting in the way in the early days, but rather than speeding you towards the solution that you want. So all of this stuff, as I think we've been saying so far on this slide, you should be able to do from a very low tech start point with just email and spreadsheets and all of these things. And what will happen as you go through that, and this is what we found, as you go through it, is you'll want to start scaling things up and doing things a bit more sophisticated, and you'll want to say, well, I don't want to wait 3 days for that thing to happen, I want that to happen in half an hour. And so this is the point where technology really can come in and can start to make things better. So some of the experience that we see, because we do ABM ourselves, but we also, as the slide shows, we help other customers do ABM. Where we get a lot of interest from ABM is where people are saying, look, I know that this is ABM is working for me and this is going to be good. I'm struggling to scale. Can you help us? And that's where we really get involved and we can start to make a difference. But I think that, as we're saying, if you try and do that too early, you're setting yourself up to fail, because you'll tie yourselves to particular software and ways of doing things before you even really understand what's going to have an impact. So that's really echoing what we've been saying, but we've definitely found that to be true in our experience and also in the experience of our customers.
Thanks, Nick. And Joe, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, exactly the same as the other guys. Beware of shiny kit syndrome, which is the phrase we throw at all these new self-service tech products that you can get. Really, a spreadsheet, some good data, and if you really need to buy anything, start with Sales Navigator, but then learn how to use it properly and teach your sales teams how to use it properly. Let marketing have access to that. But yeah, don't go mad on the tech. There's a lot of companies out there who are very, very effective at selling their solution. We spend a large part of our time as an ABM agency unpicking those tech stacks because they're overly complex, the workflows are convoluted, and the more in-depth the tech stack is, the more reliance there is likely to have been with the IT department. As soon as we have to start bothering the IT department, it puts the brakes on the whole campaign setup. They want to know who we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and of course we're trying to unpick decisions that have already been made. So the tech stack, absolutely fantastic once you've been running ABM and you want efficiencies of scale. It's less important when you're starting out. Start with a pilot, make sure the pilot's well grounded, build that out, do your hard work, and there is no silver bullet. Do your hard work, then start adding in tech to help you.
Great. I think probably we're all very aligned on that, which is good. Thanks, Joe. Okay, yeah, so moving on to the metrics and what you should be tracking. Obviously, this is going to be really important because if you're doing an ABM campaign, you need to prove to your management and to the wider business that this has been worthwhile doing. I'm aware that kind of a resounding theme throughout this has been that it will vary campaign to campaign, company to company, but it would be great, I think, for the audience if we can just try and unpick some of the metrics that they really should be looking to track. So I guess, Nick, as a founder and CEO, we could start with you. What are the things you care about and want to see reported on in ABM campaigns within your company?
Sure. So moving, further up, I suppose, in the funnel than revenue and pipeline being built, which are the sort of ultimate metrics that we're looking for. The thing that we really are interested in is genuine engagement. So one of the things that we see that, this is one of the things that we help people do, so we do it for ourselves, is to really understand engagement far more deeply than just, who clicked what and who downloaded what. And, the thing that we really look for is who's spending time on what particular parts of what particular document. So the way that our system works is we're set up, we get notified whenever someone has spent, more than 3 minutes in a case study and, turned a particular series of pages and watched a particular video. So we've taken the time to understand the patterns that indicate that people are engaging in ways that are meaningful, and that's the stuff that really, prior to generating pipeline, as I say, gets us excited and causes us to push in particular directions. And we find it's really important to do this. And one of the stories I wanted to tell here is that we were spending money on LinkedIn and Twitter to promote what we were doing, and we were seeing, and these numbers are made up, but to illustrate the point, for every £1, say, that we spent on Twitter, we were getting 5 people clicking through to a piece of content. But on LinkedIn, for every £1 that we spent, we were getting 10 people clicking through. So you would think, well, let's spend our money on LinkedIn. But when we delved in far deeper, we find, yes, you're getting more clicks on LinkedIn, but those people aren't engaging in the way that they are on Twitter. On Twitter, they're getting far more engagement with the piece that you're putting out there. And so we obviously focused our budget accordingly. So that's just one example, but it illustrates the point that you have to really understand, if you are going to look for engagement, which you have to prior to building pipeline, then you really have to make sure that you're measuring the right type of engagement. And as I say, for us, this is things like amount of time spent reading particular pieces of content and so on. So that's the thing that I would say that we found to be particularly helpful in this realm.
Thanks, Nick. Just conscious of time, I think if we just take like a top tip from both, firstly Owen and then Joe on this, then we can move on to the next section.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nick's pretty much hit the nail on the head there. The only thing I would say is just when it comes to the metrics, you've obviously got different people looking for different things from the metrics. So absolutely, as campaigns are going, part of the alignment process needs to be making sure that any insights and information regarding genuine and authentic engagement with your outreach, with your sort of best practice marketing, needs to be filtered down and very transparent to sales who will be on the front lines having calls, potentially meetings with people as well. So just make sure that those sort of real-time metrics are being transparently shared across the company, so that you're making the most of what you're learning.
Yeah, and I'd echo that. ABM shouldn't be the only marketing activity that's going on. So the insights that you're picking up, and purchasing intent and engagement and individual engagement and inbound lead flow and all these things, that insight should be shared across the organization for your other marketing campaigns as well, because it can help sharpen the pen, or sharpen the sword rather, in order to make those campaigns better as well, because it doesn't all start and end with ABM. It's very important, and as an ABM agency we would say that, you know, it's all ABM, but in the real world it isn't. So take those insights and make sure they're cascaded throughout the organization where it's relevant.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Perfect. I think if we'll just jump on to the next section now, which I think we've all agreed, having talked previously to this live broadcast between ourselves, is that it's probably the most important part to a successful ABM campaign. And this is about aligning with the rest of the business. And it's not just sales, it's also CS, it's also your management team. There's some top tips on this slide that I would just give in terms of making sure you get buy-in early, and a few other key points in terms of standardizing terms and setting the benefits. I'd also love to hear your thoughts, and if we jump to Owen first, in terms of any top tips you have for everyone listening on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the stuff that you have on the slide there, and through various slides that we've talked on already, that we've covered everything, but I'll go through them quickly. So getting buy-in from internal stakeholders first and foremost is absolutely essential, and then from that process you need to set realistic expectations, because what you're doing here is you're going to need to secure budget from the company for your ABM program, and it's a long-term program. ABM is not a short-term revenue grab, and you need to avoid the pitfall of sort of failing from the get-go by not setting realistic expectations from your internal stakeholders. So that is crucial. As far as specifically aligning sales, marketing, and customer success, I've got two really key tips. One is to have service level agreements in place, SLAs, and basically what that means is it outlines the responsibilities for all the departments or all of the people involved in your ABM activity. And then the second is to have a shared scorecard. And what that means is it ensures that departments are measured on success or failure sometimes equally. And what this serves to get rid of is the divide between particularly or historically sales and marketing, where you should never arrive at a situation where marketing is celebrating great engagement, but sales is not celebrating great success and sort of revenue driven. And what that shared scorecard sets to do is to even the playing field and make sure that everyone is measured on success the same way. I think those are probably the most important takeaways from me.
Thanks, Owen. And Joe, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think basically to echo what Owen has said there, but to add on the end, however long your stages of delivery for ABM are and the things that you're going to consider, the final step should be measure, learn, optimize, and repeat. So it's not a set and forget program. It's a living, breathing thing, ABM. So it will change. You're dealing with human beings. They're all different. We all want different things, and we all want different things at different times. So you're going to have to measure, learn, optimize, and repeat. And it is not a silver bullet. It takes time. Like Owen said, if you want revenue tomorrow, ABM is not the program for you. It's certainly high-end, tactical, bordering on strategic, depending on where you want to go with your ABM, but it's not a revenue grab. It takes time.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thanks, Joe. And Nick, how do you align your team at Turtle?
Yeah, so what we did, and I'd be interested to see, if other people have a view on this. What we did is we started off by taking one sales guy who's focused on one market with very specific ideas around what he wanted to achieve and who he wanted to go after, really understood, as we're saying, his target. sat him down with someone who was going to represent marketing and drive things from that side. And they worked really, really closely to build out messaging and tactics and all the things that we've spoken about to create kind of a very tightly contained pilot. And these people sat next to each other day to day in the office for a period, because I think often if people are sitting in different offices even on different sides of the office, those incidental conversations around what's going on are much harder to have, and alignment is harder to achieve. But we got people sitting next to each other working towards exactly the same targets, and this was really successful because those two took the time that they needed, obviously bringing in additional resource when they needed it, to prove something out, to prove that they could get engagement, to prove that they could build pipe. And actually I totally take the point that it's a more strategic thing, but they were able to close business quite quickly through this approach. And so by doing that, this makes it far easier to get support for a bigger pilot, because the benefits are really obvious to everyone. And then you've got other people from the sales team and the marketing team saying, hey, I want a piece of this, I want more pipeline, I want to close more business. And so that approach that we took, and I guess we're a company where we're able to do that. I imagine with bigger companies it's harder to run that kind of skunk project, but this was really successful for us in helping people understand the benefits and getting proper alignment from sort of every part of the business. It was very successful for us.
That's really interesting. And actually, just anecdotally from Cognism, what we've done in terms of not just for ABM, but aligning sales and marketing more closely, we've actually brought 2 of the sales development representatives into the marketing team, and we call them marketing development representatives. And their sole KPIs and focus is all on demand generated through marketing. Everything they're measured on aligns completely with marketing, and that's all aligned back up to the business. So it's tied in really nicely, and we found that that's really helped us increase all of the metrics across the marketing funnel. And that's just one way that we've done it, and it's something maybe that people could try if they feel that that would be useful. Sorry, I just put myself on mute. Not very helpful. Moving on to the final stage. This is the 3 top tips for success, but I think I've just looked at the time and I want to get through some of the live questions. So maybe if we just go around and do 1 top tip from everyone, and then we've also got this slide from Joe, which is sort of his 5 top tips, and he'll probably touch on 1, but it should be a helpful resource for everyone. So if we kick off first with Joe, what would be your top tip to someone going away and wanting to implement ABM tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. And to pick one of those 5, really, I'd go for engage and unite. If sales don't understand why ABM is happening and the process and the steps that a lead has gone through to get to be classed as a marketing qualified or a sales accepted lead, if they have no visibility as to that, it's just another name. There's no importance placed on it. There's no momentum. So if sales understand what's happening and why, they're much more likely to jump on those leads and close them, and it should be seen as a joint effort to close that lead. So of those 5, I think engage and unite is critical.
Thank you. And Nick?
I'd like to try and tenuously extend the first one, top-down mentality. So I spoke before, my tip off here would be to start small and get understanding of what you want to do. So the example that I gave previously of the sales guy and the representative from marketing sitting together and working out how this is going to work with support. What that's done is that's meant that this has become very, very visible in the business. Everyone's excited about it, and so we have been able to get understanding, as this point says, from all the heads in the department. And the way that we were able to achieve that was through this sort of pilot. So I'm kind of extending that top-down mentality point, but that would be my top tip.
Thanks. And Owen?
Yeah, certainly. If Joe's point was sort of from the perspective of sales and sales input, and then Nick has sort of expanded from the company's perspective as a top-down view, I'll just hone in for any marketers out there that are listening. Certainly, it's more when it comes to the execution and sort of the marketing outreach that you're doing. It's more than ABM is not just a multi-channel. It is best practice marketing, but there's more to it than just using multiple channels. It's about treating the accounts you're going after as markets in their own right, and there's no better resource for a marketer to learn more about accounts and markets in their own right than their own internal sales team and customer success team. It really will be crucial and very insightful for marketers to get that alignment.
Thanks, and I think I'm just going to add that really, for me, my top tip would be when you start out, you need to make sure you set those really clear goals, and then you'll set up the success in terms of measuring everything from there out. If you can measure things, then you can always optimize and improve, and that really will end up being sort of the make or break of your ABM campaign. I think that's all been really interesting, and now we can jump into some of the audience questions, and if you have any more, please do just pop them into the Q&A and we'll answer them. But kicking off with the first question, that's come through. It's, what is the right balance of inbound and outbound within your ABM strategy? Now I'm going to preempt that the panel is going to say this is all going to depend on the business and the campaign. But I think maybe if we start with Owen, as you know, you're an agency who's run campaigns with a lot of different clients. What would you say broadly, or how would you approach this question?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It probably would have been what I led with. So it's a good, ahead of the curve there. I've actually had some meetings with sort of potential clients recently that are in a very fortunate position of having a lot of inbound activity and have historically not relied on outbound, which is obviously a very nice world to live in, and I appreciate it's not what all companies have the luxury of doing. And in that instance, when you've got a lot of inbound, almost to the point where you need more resource in order to start going outbound, I found that it can be really successful to start using the insights that you get from the sheer volume of inbound activity in ABM campaigns. So having that sort of huge level of inbound really will support you setting up an ABM campaign where you can be really personalized and sort of hone in on exactly what the people you're going after are interested in. However, if you are not fortunate enough to have sort of a bottomless pool of inbound, it really depends on what kind of ABM you go for. And certainly if you are looking to sort of understand a market or a sector better and you're sort of taking ABM as a new approach, I would recommend sort of running a pilot one-to-many or programmatic ABM campaign where you're applying the sort of level of knowledge and the ideas behind ABM to your outreach, and you're getting alignment. But the main goal is to start figuring out perhaps who out there is using what solutions that are your competitors, starting to find out more information over the phone and in discovery calls around what their challenges are, and things like that, sort of softer information that you could then drip feed into a more bespoke and a more focused sort of one-to-few approach where you come in with this insight that you've gathered on accounts, and you really start pumping more resource into a smaller amount of accounts.
Thanks, Owen.
Does that make sense?
There's a question here for Nick. From your experience in doing ABM at Turtle, which team is typically responsible for prioritizing the accounts? Is it sales or marketing? Is it a combination? How does that work for you?
It's a combination. It's sales, marketing, and customer success. So forgive me, I can't remember if it was Joe or Owen or potentially both who were talking about getting all of those people in a room. Sales know who they want to go after, and sales know which accounts look like accounts that they've managed to close successfully and in a way that worked for them. Customer success know which ones to look after, which ones are best to look after, and which ones have potentially going to have the most growth opportunity. And marketing have a really good steer on what's going on in that particular market, and how our other marketing activity is going down in those particular verticals. So it's very much a joint effort. It's typically initiated in our case by our sales director speaking to the sales team and trying to understand, this is our kind of wish list. And then, they'll sit down and go through that with customer success and marketing, and customer success will say, I don't want to look after that sort of customer. I don't want to do that. That's not going to work for that reason. And marketing will say, well, these people aren't really going to work for us because blah, blah, blah. So it is initiated by sales, but it's very much a conversation, and it's not sort of dictated by any one party. And there's, ultimately mutual agreement on, okay, this is the list. Let's start going after them.
Great. Yeah, I think that's very similar to how it works for us at Cognism as well. So we've kind of hit the hour mark, so I just wanted to touch on some of these useful resources that you'll see on the screen now. There's lots more, and all three of our panelists have got blogs which cover a lot of interesting topics around ABM and all very actionable advice. So yeah, please do take a look at these. As well, I would get in a lot of trouble if I don't mention the Cognism blog. Lots of brilliant resources there as well around ABM. And finally, I just want to thank everybody for listening today, and our panelists, Joe, Owen and Nick, for your time. The webinar's been recorded, and we'll be sharing a link along with a copy of the slides later today. And yeah, thanks everyone. I hope you found it useful, and please provide feedback, because we want to aim to make these as actionable and as useful for you as possible.
Thanks, Alice. Nicely moderated.
Thanks.
Yeah, appreciate your time, guys.
Bye.
Love talking about ABM.